Get my Janet Jackson. Sorry, I'm supposed to
We
stay
had
on
to put her
script.
Madonna
Okay,
on.
Go.
all
Janet
good.
Jackson, Madonna.
It's all
I had
good.
to go. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, hello, creating change. Welcome to Washington, D.C., what will someday be the 51st state in this United
Yes.
States. Welcome to our annual family reunion of nearly 4,000 people, ready to learn, connect, and resist. I am so honored and excited to stand here with a woman I have long respected, our new Deputy Executive Director, Kierra Johnson. Thank you. As many of you know, the Deputy Executive Director of the task force is a movement leadership role. And Kierra brings to the task force her over 20 years of dynamic and badass leadership in the reproductive justice movement.
Yes.
As you just heard a little bit about, 3 decades ago, in 1987, our community organized and galvanized for what was called the Second March on Washington for Lesbian and Gay Rights. The theme was, for love and for life, we are not going back. It was organized in response to the Reagan administration's complete and immoral disregard for thousands of people dying of AIDS. And in response to the Supreme Court upholding the criminalization of our sexuality through sodomy laws in the Bowers v. Hardwick decision. We have come a long way, including the visibility of bi+ and trans people who are showing so much leadership for the path ahead. We want to thank all of you who are bi+, trans, genderqueer, pansexual, asexual, intersex, fluid, and all of us who defy labels, or who know that language will never be fully adequate to express all of who we are. This movement would not be strong without you.
That's right.
As you heard earlier, those of us who were at the 1987 march were asked to return home, roll up our sleeves, and get to work. And the task force started getting all these calls for help in learning how to do grassroots organizing. And as a way for the movement to teach itself the skills we needed, Sue, Urvashi, Sonia, Susan, and the task force staff, of which there are only like 9 or 10 at the time, sprang into action. And in October 1988, the Creating Change Conference was born. For the first conference 30 years ago, Sue and Urvashi walked up to Hotel Washington with a box of supplies, hoping that a few people might show up, and we take a little bit more preparation now. And as you heard corrected, first by Sue and then Urvashi who corrected Sue, there were 220, I think 3 people who showed up. They shared their strategies, taught each other skills, made connections, and then went home and started knocking on doors and organizing to change laws and change hearts and minds.
30 years later, we are here. We are queer, and we are still not going to let this country go backwards. 30 years later, we are here at Creating Change, the most diverse and dynamic conference in the LGBTQ movement. 30 years later, we continue to insist on the beauty and the value of each and every one of our lives. We continue to commit ourselves to the work of social justice. If you have attended 25 or more Creating Change conferences, please stand if you are able, wave your hands, or shout out.
All right.
More than 25.
Woo!
Take a look around. Thank you for all of your work. Yes, there's like high-fiving. What? Thank you. Thank you for all of your work, for laying the foundation for a conference that has helped build the LGBTQ movement. And now a very special welcome for those of you who are here for the first time. Raise your hand, stand, or shout out if you can, if it's your first time. We need you. We need you. And you are in for a transformational experience. Today, 30 years later, we still have a lot of work to do before we achieve full liberation, justice, and freedom for LGBTQ people. Needless to say, this last year has presented nothing short of an existential threat to our progress and to our very lives. But you are here. We are here. It is nothing short of a testament to the sheer will of human resilience that we are all here in this room today. We know that so many of us in this room and watching live stream, many of us not in this room, have experienced trauma, threats, and stress this year. Ray and I want you to know that the National LGBTQ Task Force is thankful, grateful you are here, and that you are alive. We are thankful that you have chosen to spend a few days with this community of activists and hope that you take full advantage of the opportunities to learn, connect, resist, and maybe have a little fun.
As
Is that you?
you go. No, really.
As people, you know, you could take the girl out of Georgia, but not the Georgia out the girls. Okay, so, all right. As people who care about the work for social justice, this last year has been relentless. It's been brutal. The Muslim bans, the cruel all-out attack on immigrants, including dreamers, making schools less safe for transgender young people, allowing employers to deny birth control coverage, and Trump's Department of Justice issuing a sweeping license to discriminate, allowing anyone to use their religious beliefs as an excuse to discriminate against someone else. Think about it. The implications are terrifying. And just this last week, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services created a so-called Office of Conscience and Religious Freedom, which could allow healthcare providers to discriminate against patients because they are transgender or seeking reproductive health care, including safe legal abortion. But we are not fooled. The new office is meant to make it easier for people to discriminate, not protect people of faith. Health professionals have a duty to care for all of their patients, regardless of who they are. Besides, the overwhelming majority of people of faith support healthcare access for all women and LGBTQ people.
That's right. The parade of horribles that have happened this year at the hands of a tyrannical government are too numerous to list. Whether he is ever impeached or not, the task force is no longer going to call Trump the president. Trump has morally and ethically vacated the office of the president. Donald Trump is a sexual harasser and abuser. He is a racist and a white supremacist. He is erratic, he is dishonest, and he is anti-democratic, and he works to ignore or undermine the Constitution he has sworn to uphold. The steps Donald Trump and his friends are taking to move towards a tyrannical government are clear. He has tried to convince the American people that what is true is false, and what is false is true. He is trying to undercut the balance of powers by telling Congress he'll make a deal and then goes back on his word. He has neglected his duties to devote resources to the people of Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands, leaving thousands of Americans He has left thousands of Americans without water or electricity. The list goes on. Trump himself has vacated the responsibilities of the office, and this is precisely why the task force will no longer refer to him with the title of president. We'll refer to him as Trump, maybe businessman Trump, maybe some other things. But he has simply not lived up to the responsibilities of the role of the president. In our movement, we know a drama queen when we see one. The drama queen in chief is a real problem. He is also a manifestation of a much larger problem, and he is a distraction all at the same time. He is the most visible part of a machine at work to undermine democracy, surface and flame racial tensions, solidify white supremacists in power, and establish an extremist Christian nation. While tweets and tantrums and lies, legal issues in Russia have been taking up the headlines, there are threats to our LGBTQ progress and progressive progress happening at the state and local level you all know too well we must pay attention to, that we must direct our energies towards. Now more than ever, to ensure a future for freedom and justice, all politics is local and the personal is political. Our job as activists and as a movement is to educate ourselves, our own community, and the country about the ways equality is being threatened and rolled back. And in particular, transgender members of our community, LGBTQ people of color, and people living in poverty are bearing the brunt of the attacks. The National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs, in its 2017 annual report released just this week, recorded 52 hate-related homicides of LGBTQ people and people with HIV, the highest number ever recorded by the report. And we know there is underreporting. That is a rate of 1 murder a week of someone in our community. 22 of these homicides were transgender women of color, and 71% of the murders were of people of color.
And once again, we are fighting for equality at the ballot box. For example, right now in Anchorage, Alaska, there's a measure on the April ballot, Proposition 1, which seeks to bar the city from recognizing the existence of transgender people by defining sex for all municipal purposes as an immutable biological condition determined at birth. It would also repeal the city's existing protections, ensuring that transgender people have equal access to facilities consistent with their gender identity in their workplace and in public spaces. In Massachusetts, there is a November ballot seeking to repeal a portion of the state's non-discrimination law, which currently ensures fair and equal treatment for our transgender neighbors, family, and friends. And we're all keeping our eyes out on Montana, where an effort is underway to put yet another anti-trans measure up for popular vote. Fortunately, our community in Montana is working hard to prevent that, but we may be facing yet another cruel attack on transgender people.
You know, in the years we were fighting to secure marriage equality, we used to say how horrible it was to have your neighbors and friends and coworkers vote on whether or not you were allowed to marry the person you love. So here we are in 2018, and our neighbors, friends, and coworkers are going to vote on whether and where you get to use a bathroom. Really? Friends, we are having deja vu. This is just like in 2004, in the early fight for marriage, when the opposition started putting forth anti-marriage ballot measures and honing their tactics. And guess what? Our movement lost 30 times at the ballot box and spent millions of dollars before we started winning. Today, we have a chance to head them off, to fight these anti-trans measures now before it becomes a tidal wave that's harder to stop. Let's not let our trans friends, ourselves, be fodder for right-wing ballot measures. And in one of the most important court cases ever for LGBTQ rights, the Supreme Court will decide in the Masterpiece Cake case whether businesses that open their doors to the public have a constitutional right to discriminate based on their religious beliefs. The implications for this case are breathtaking. Yes, a baker could refuse to make a cake for a gay couple. A store could also refuse to sell a dress to a trans woman or gender nonconforming person. A restaurant could turn away a queer family for service. We've been there before, and we do not need to go backwards. This could undercut all of the non-discrimination measures we worked so hard to achieve and could threaten our future progress. Between this Supreme Court case, these ballot measures, legislation moving through the states, and federal actions, 2018 has the potential to be one of the most consequential and damaging years for LGBTQ people.
In this last year, the threats that many of us have experienced and witnessed for generations is becoming apparent to the critical masses in our country and around the world. Woke is a state of being. It is an action. It succeeds sleep. Our country has been asleep, and we need to get woke. Every time we say, "Me too," every time we say, Carice Lewis, Ebony Morgan, Sherelle Faulkner, and the names of countless others who have been taken from us in hate crimes. Every time we name white supremacy and homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia, someone else wakes up. Every time we act to combat sexism, ableism, xenophobia, and every attack on our humanity and our dignity, someone else wakes up. Someone else gets woke. When any one of us gives voice to the realities of our own experience, we create space and support for someone else to speak their truth. Because of the movement for Black Lives, because of the women's marches, because of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, because of the National LGBTQ Task Force, and because of you, there are millions of people across the country that are waking up to the truth. Each day unearths high-profile examples of these threats. Every day, the news reports of these traumas. And every hour, Twitter and Facebook reveal the micro and macro aggressions that plague our communities. But because of the courage, our courage to speak our truths, no longer can the prevalence of white supremacy be dismissed as the rantings of conspiracy theorists. No longer can the negative impact of misogyny and sexual abuse be denied. No longer can our country pretend that race and gender-based violence and harassment have been eradicated. As we continue to tell our stories, our truths, as we fight to topple this tyrannical regime. We must be mindful that this is a long game. And to survive and ultimately thrive, we must remember that our resilience is paramount. These are difficult times, to say the least, and there will be losses along the way, but if we are to fight for justice, if we are going to win, we must fortify ourselves and our movement. We must build power. In 1967, in Atlanta, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. encouraged activists to think differently about power and their relationship to it. He says, "Power, properly understood, is the ability to achieve purpose. It is the strength required to bring about social, political, and economic changes. In this sense, power is not only desirable, but necessary in order to implement the demands of love and justice."
Why must we build power? Because it will help us to attain the things we need for LGBTQ people and our families. We need healing. We need access to healthcare. We need housing, education, quality jobs. We need good food and spaces to love, live, and play together. We have these needs and others, and we shouldn't have to ask for things that are already within our human rights.
That's right.
Our job is to build and leverage the power to take back what has systematically been taken from us and ensure these rights are accessible to all. On this journey to power, building power, we must continue to think big, to be bold, and to commit to being responsive to new threats and using new tactics. And we also must continue to learn tried and true grassroots organizing tactics. We've got to knock on doors and talk to our neighbors about the issues that affect them. We've got to run for office and support each other when we campaign. Yeah, I'm talking to a number of you out there. We must protect our voting rights and get our people to the polls in November. We've got to talk to elected officials and tell them of the reality of how legislative action affects our lives, and remind them that we are their constituents too. And if they aren't listening to us, we will find and elect someone who will. We must also continue to march, tweet, blog, call, sit in, and advocate. But we must do it with a purpose. That purpose is to build power. In his speech, Reverend Dr. King goes on to say that power at its best is love, implementing the demands of justice. Justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against it.
He's talking about building community. Love and power are inextricably linked in our quest for justice. Luck would have it that love and power are also embodied within each and every one of us. Building a resilient community is not easy in charged times. Oppression, bigotry, discrimination, and violence are hurled at us regularly, sometimes daily, sometimes multiple times daily. And through this, we are expected to care for our families and our friends and also focus on the mission and goals of our work. We are fighting hostile local, state, and federal policy. We are fighting those who would harass and harm us physically. We're fighting against systems and institutions that refuse to evolve and embrace the complexities of our lives. With the stress that we're all under, it is no surprise that at times we can get careless with each other, with our comrades and colleagues who are in this struggle with us every day. Every single person in this room, including us, has done something that triggered, upset, and frustrated someone that we respect and admire. We're only human. But it is precisely in these times that we must recommit ourselves to honoring our own humanity and engaging in ways that intentionally honors the humanity of others. This is how we build a resilient community. So let us be gentle with one another and exercise compassion through our own personal and movement evolutions. Let's reflect on how our words, actions, and strategies can exemplify our intention to build the arc of history toward justice. And as we falter, and we surely will, let's gather the lessons from those moments and leave behind what doesn't serve our greater aspirations.
If we can acknowledge that it's impossible to be perfect, we allow ourselves and each other the gift of space to fail on the path to victory. Social movements are not built on the success of one leader or one organization, but through the power and the resilience of community. When we build a resilient community, we win, regardless of the losses along the way, because we are building a resilient movement that will withstand the test of time. Over this last year, we have seen examples of resilience, of standing up for ourselves and others, of hope. When Muslims and non-Muslims showed up at airports across the country to provide welcome, to ensure safe passage, and to provide legal help to Muslims arriving from other countries.
When voters of all types showed up at the polls to elect historic numbers of LGBTQ people, and a special shout out to our new trans elected officials.
When people of all races demonstrated at protests against police brutality, gun violence, and murders of Black people, and exclaimed, "Black Lives Matter."
When immigrants and non-immigrants have insisted that those who are undocumented and the dreamers be allowed to stay in this country and not be torn away from their families.
And when millions of people attended the Women's March last year and last weekend, demanding gender, equity, and racial justice for all. It has become clear, no matter how many setbacks we face, no matter what challenges are thrown at us, we are showing up for ourselves and each other. We will resist, survive, and thrive.
We will resist, survive, and thrive. Here's the thing. As LGBTQ people, as women, as Muslims, as Jews, as immigrants, as Black folks, as Latinx, Asian Pacific Americans, as indigenous people, as folks living with HIV, we know how to survive. Yeah. We know how to survive. We know how to organize. We know how to sustain each other. We are a resilient people. We've done this before, and we will do it again. From the Stonewall Inn uprising to building an entire care system for people with HIV when the government refused to do so. From getting homosexuality, yeah, y'all can clap. From getting homosexuality removed from the list of mental illnesses, which, by the way, was the task force's first accomplishment in 1973. To winning marriage equality, from opening the doors to LGBT service members to the dozens of pro-LGBTQ laws that you and others have passed at the state and local level. And just yesterday, hundreds of you went up to Capitol Hill for our Advocacy Day to make your powerful voices heard. It takes us to make change, and it takes us to sustain it. We know how to be strategic, and we know how to build leaders to take action. If there is anything our LGBTQ history has shown us, it's that our community does not give up. Our community does not give up.
That's right.
We all have a role to play in bearing witness, in resisting, and showing up for others who are different from us. Acts of bravery, of moral fortitude, of protest, of empathy and compassion. Acts large and small, they all count. We have our work cut out for us, and it will take time, but we know this: we will win. We will win. We ask you to join us in resisting fear and not allowing anger to consume us, and to not succumb to despair.
When we and others look back at this time, it will be asked, what did we do? What did we do to bolster each other? What did we do to strengthen the community of people working from a place of expansive love, interconnectedness, and power for good? Those who come after us will ask, what did you do in those years of tyranny? The answer is and must be, we stood tall, we stood by each other, and we fought like hell for our lives. We fought for each other's lives and for democracy. Connections with each other are so critical to our survival. When one of us wakes up and faces a day when we are challenged to hold on to our hope, to our dreams, we have to trust that someone else will hold on to them for us and keep them safe. There are days when any one of us wakes up, and I can't imagine how we'll get through that day, how a wrench has been thrown in our wheels of progress. There are days when I lose hope. But then I know that someone else is hopeful that day, that someone else has the energy and the will and the passion to carry on. And then perhaps the next day, when they're feeling discouraged, I can return the favor of holding hope. We hold hope collectively. The road ahead is going to be tough indeed, but we have the strength, the stamina, the smarts, and the courage to get through it. We will lose some, but we will also win some. And our movement has the blueprint to regain any ground we lost because we built it in the first place.
That's right.
That's right. We built it. The National LGBTQ Task Force was made for this time, and we will continue to play the critical role of watchdog, alerting our movement and others to changes the administration is trying to make, sometimes in the dead of night. And you were made for this time. You were made for this time. Yes, we must defend our progress, but we must not lose hope that our vision for full liberation, justice, and freedom is more than possible. It is inevitable.
All right. This week at Creating Change, we're not just strengthening ourselves for the next year or 3 years. We are building skills, connections, and power for the next decade, for the generations to come. And like those 300 people 30 years ago who showed up to the first Creating Change conference, we have what we need for the movement to teach itself, for us to inspire each other. We are what we need. Each one of us has the strength within us to move forward, and we do have the power to change the world. Look around you. No, really, look around you. Feel the energy of the thousands of people in this conference, and know that together we can create change. So let's do this.
Let's do this.